Okay, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody need a quick stretch? So I did something just to show you how much of a nerd I am. I don't know if nerd translates very well into German, but yesterday I counted 6 times that the term GBAS was used, and it's very gratifying because I work with GBAS, but 6 different speakers. So this morning at breakfast, just chatting with a couple of folks, it was quite interesting to hear the question, well, what is this GBAS thing? And so where my presentation is listed as an update on GBAS, I'm going to spend just a little bit of time for those of you who don't know about GBAS or don't remember about GBAS, just to tell you what it is so we can move forward kind of with the same common understanding. Kind of the flight path that, let's see, what do I want to do here? Is this my advance? Very good. The flight path I want to follow today, like I just said, a little refresher on GBAS for those that know about it, or a new introduction for those, that it's a new topic. Then I want to let you know about what's going on with GBAS around the world. And the installations that I'm going to talk about happen to be Honeywell installations, but that's because we are the only certified GBAS in the world today. We will be talking about places where certified GBAS is installed. And then I'm going to talk to you about what's going on with the airplane equipage. And I've already thrown a new acronym at you up here. GLS is what we call the equipment in the airplane that works with GBAS. And it sounds like ILS and MLS, so it's kind of a familiarity kind of thing as well with pilots. I want to talk to you then a little bit about, why do we even do this? And SmartPath, by the way, is the name of our GBAS, so you might see me use this term SmartPath interchangeably. And then I really want to leave you all with a call to action about how we move forward with GBAS and extract the benefits that it can provide. So who recognizes what's in each of these 26 pictures? Anybody know what this stuff is? Okay. I know that some of you do. Afraid to raise your hand. I won't call on you if you raise your hand, by the way. It's just a quick question. But this is an ILS. This is an instrument landing system. This portion here is called the Localizer. This normally gets installed at the opposite end of the runway where the approach is being flown. And it very much has to go in a specific location at the end of the runway. And it's a fairly large piece of antenna equipment. This piece here is called the glide slope antenna, and it goes alongside the runway. But you need a localizer and a glide slope antenna for each ILS precision approach. Okay? The localizer gives the airplane lateral guidance to fly down toward the runway, and the glide slope gives the vertical guidance. When you put this in the ground, when you cement an ILS into the ground, you install it. That establishes what the glide slope angle will be. So once you construct this and install it, that glide slope angle is the one you get until you uninstall it and move it or change it. So if you saw the previous presentation for the 3.2 degree glide slope, how did they get a 3.2 degree glide slope? They put in a second ILS. Right, a second one of these to give that 3.2 degree angle. Normally these are set at 3 degrees. It's kind of the average that's been accepted for decades now. GBAS provides precision approach by augmenting GPS so we can use GPS to fly precision approach. We can talk offline if you want to know why we augment GPS to use it for precision approach and how we do that. But suffice it for our time constraints today to know that you can't just use GPS as it comes out of space. You have to augment it, and that's what the GBAS does. One GBAS station provides 26 different precision approaches at the airport where it's installed, okay? And each approach is a set of digital data points that comes up from the GBAS system to the airplane. So not to be prescriptive about what approaches you should use and what glide slope angles, whatever one you decide on that meets the safety criteria, the flyability criteria, that provides the most effective noise abatement, it's a software load into a GBAS and you can send it up. So if you want to do multiple approaches, you have 26 to work with for each GBAS. And oh, by the way, it doesn't need to be at the end of a runway. It can be put in at the airport wherever you have some space. So let's look a little bit more first at the equipment, and then let's talk about some of the things that you can do with GBAS, some of the flexibility you can get. So instead of 26 localizer antennas and 26 glide slope antennas, and nobody would really do that, right? You just don't have the real estate to do that at an airport. We put in 4 GPS reference receivers, nominally about 100 to 200 meters apart. We have a 19-inch electronics rack that looks just like every other 19-inch electronics rack, although our engineers think this one's like the best-looking electronics rack in the world. But inside this rack are some very, very sophisticated processors, power supplies, and VHF radios, okay? Again, catch me offline, I'll tell you how this provides precision approach and how it augments GPS, but this is just the footprint of the equipment. We send the augmentation information and the approach points that define up to these 26 different approaches. We send that up to the airplane on a VHF data link, a digital data link, and so we need a VHF antenna. The antenna is just this piece up here. This is the mast, and the mast height varies depending on the installation, depending on the airport. So 4 of these. One of these sits in a building. Obviously, you don't want to leave it out in the rain. And a VHF antenna. That's what a GBAS is. That's 26 precision approaches, one system. We do interface to the unit through a data terminal, which looks just like a laptop PC. And we also annotate either on a dedicated display or an existing display in the air traffic control tower. In fact, any place that you want to have this status unit. It tells the controllers whether the approach system is available or if it's not available. So that's what a GBAS looks like. What can I do to convince you that we're the world's first and only? Well, you can check, but we're very proud. We also don't think we would ever try this again if we'd known at the beginning what we knew at the end about how long this would take to get certified. But we are the world's first and only. We have an FAA certification for Category 1. We have a German BAF, that's the regulator in Germany, certification. And by nature of those certifications, we are ICAO compliant. Okay? People sometimes ask, how do we get ICAO certification? ICAO does not provide certifications. They provide standards and recommended practices that various member states of ICAO turn into certification criteria. So here we are in Germany, and our friends Air Berlin, working with DFS, performed the very first GLS approach and landing in revenue passenger service. So this was a scheduled flight. I don't think the weather was particularly bad that night, but they flew this as an instrument approach, and that was just a couple years ago right up the road here. Catch me on the break too, I'll tell you an interesting story about how they got to be first, and there's some fun to be had with that. I also thought they did a pretty good job here, almost, of doing this 3-degree glide slope by lining the people up. This is just German efficiency. So you've heard that there are some noise benefits by changing glide slope angles and some of the operational things, elements of active noise abatement. Again, not to be prescriptive as to which are the right ones to do, just want to show you that with GBAS, the ones that you decide on are software loads and easy to do. So here's our 3-degree, nominally 3-degree ILS glide slope coming in from an ILS. And again, once you put that ILS equipment in, that's what that approach will look like until you have an earthquake or until you move or adjust the equipment. We can do that too. You can make one of your 26 GBAS approaches look just like that ILS, and the airplane will fly just down the same exact path. Although I'll tell you that it will fly down that path rock solid and not have any beam bends like you get with ILS, no wavering of the beam as you fly through. But you're not limited to that. You can have a different touchdown spot. You can have a different touchdown spot and a different glide slope. Whatever you can conceive of that would be a benefit, operationally, efficiently, for efficiency, you can do with a GBAS. This is just to show you a little further out, to illustrate a point. If you look at the red line, this is what a 3 degree would look like. 3.2 is up here, and it's just to illustrate the further out you get, there's some of the vertical component that you get. A 2.5 degree glide slope would be here. And nobody's talked about a 2.5 degree glide slope, and that obviously would have some noise impacts. But if you go to a place like Dubai, where Emirates Airlines has either delivered or on order to be delivered 90 A380s, 90 A380s. If you're a 737 or an A320 and you're landing behind an A380, you're going to be a long way behind him so you don't get into the wake vortex that are generated by this heavy airplane. So what if you took and put the A380 on a 2.5 degree glide slope and you put a 737 on a 3.2 degree glide slope? I'm going to hand fly now for a minute, so stay with me. But both guys on a 3 degree glide slope, you put this big spacing behind them. Heavy airplane on a shallower glide slope, lighter airplane on a steeper glide slope. I now have a vertical component of separation, and I can reduce the in-trail distance, which turns into capacity. So this is just one of the examples of why you might want to do something like this and take advantage of these various and variable glide slopes. You may also want to offset approaches, and the offset could be because you have some minimums, higher minimums on an approach because there's a controlling obstacle on the missed approach. And I won't bore you with all the approach procedure design criteria, but for category 1 anyway, you can vary plus or minus 10 degrees of the final approach course without changing the minimums. Again, if you decide you want to do that and there's some advantage to it, it's a software load to put that approach into the GBAS. Who heard the term RNP mentioned yesterday? Okay, required navigation performance, and it was actually mentioned in the context of GBAS as well. RNP is an inherent capability in most modern airplanes now that allow the airplane to navigate with some really, really good precision, both vertically and laterally. And it is a great, great capability for flying curved or complex approaches. In this case here, we're showing the traditional set of waypoints, and this happens to be Bermuda. That's some wishful thinking on my part. I think I need to go and do some more investigation down here in Bermuda. But this is the radar tracks for a day, and you can see that approaches are splayed all over the place. And okay, it's out over the ocean, it's not a big noise impact, but you can imagine that this is a number of local communities with this random noise coming and going. And that's because you're going to fly into these waypoints, and someplace out here the controller will pick you up and give you a radar vector to this final at least 8 nautical miles long for an ILS. With RNP, you can have a shorter, consistent, repeatable track, and at the point that the RNP approach ends, you can have a GLS precision approach, final approach segment, meet the RNP and take over the guidance of the airplane. Now you've got precision approach and you have the ability to auto land, which you can't do with just RNP alone. So RNP and GLS is the cake and the icing on the cake. And I don't know if there's another equivalent terminology in German, but what does that really mean though? Well, for a single aisle airplane, so a 737, A320 kind of airplane, you can see this 4 nautical mile final and using this efficient leg, saves 10.6 nautical miles. That doesn't sound like much until you say, okay, well, that's 3 minutes of flight time. That's much fuel. And guess what? When you don't burn as much fuel, you don't send out as much emissions and you don't make as much noise, okay? So RNP, a great saver for the airlines in terms of track miles. It's great for improving the efficiency and capacity of an airport. And you can also use this RNP capability to have the approach flown over noise-compatible areas, okay, if you have the choice to fly over noise-compatible areas. So take out of your heads this 3-degree angled line that starts at the runway and goes out for many, many miles, and everybody gets in that line. That you can do whatever you need to do to avoid noise-sensitive areas and still safely and efficiently land the airplane. Okay, so was it 2 years ago, Stefan? When did we, our first active noise abatement conference? We did 3 years. Geez, I'm getting old. So we were just talking about GBAS and some initial places that we were looking at. And I'm very, very pleased to report that the adoption of GBAS, especially since the certifications happened, has greatly increased. And I'll let you go through this chart, but I will draw your attention to this particular dot up here, and if you would like to know more about that GBAS project, Stefan Mahl from Fraport is in the audience, and he can certainly talk to you about the intentions and the plans there. You can see, though, that Europe is not the only location, that we're pretty much around the world, and 45 more stations that are in the pipeline. I would like to be able to tell you where they are and who they are and what those countries are. The way it goes in business negotiations, though, is we don't want to say anything till we've signed the papers and the customer decides that it's okay to announce that. But quite a few more coming. Okay, what's going on with the airplanes? GLS. We learned at the very first slide, GLS is the airborne equipment that uses GBAS. So who's doing it? Well, we've got both Boeing and Airbus covered here. The neat thing about GLS is, and there was an MLS question yesterday as well, this capability is becoming a de facto standard on airliners. Right now, it's still an option, so you can see, for instance, on the 737NG, and that's, by the way, the Dash 700, the Dash 800, the Dash 900 versions of the 737. 650 airplanes are already equipped, and you can get GLS on a 737 when it comes off the production line, or you can go back and do a retrofit. Much cheaper to do it when you're buying the airplane new. But that's 20% of all the people that operate those airplanes in the world already equipped.
Einem ganz einfachen Prozess. Sie müssen das Flugzeug gar nicht aus dem Service nehmen. Also die 787 und die 737-800 Lufthansa 737-800, ja, die sind schon installiert. Also Sie können diese Flugzeuge gar nicht kaufen, ohne dass GLS schon dabei ist. Die 737-800, also wie viele Fluggesellschaften haben sich schon entschieden, GLS gleich mit zu benutzen? Airbus hat es dann später installiert, aber man kann auch eine Aktivierungsgebühr zahlen. Es ist kein neues System, was man einbauen muss. Es gibt es schon, man muss nur für das Passwort bezahlen und dann kann man das bereitstellen. Also das ist wirklich eine sehr gute Möglichkeit, die auch genutzt wird. Also in einigen Jahren wird es 4.000 oder mehr Flugzeuge geben, die mit GLS ausgestattet sind. Das ist sehr gut für den Cat 1 und Cat 2 und jetzt sind wir auf dem Weg zu Cat 3 und Cat 2, das funktioniert schon an der Bodenstation, das wird auch nächstes Jahr kommen und wir haben hier bei den Bodenstationen weitere Entwicklungen. Wir müssen Cat 3 noch zertifizieren und das Bild aus der Luft für Cat 3 ist nicht so klar, wie wir uns das erhofft hatten. Aber für einige ist das vielleicht zu weit weg, aber für uns eigentlich nicht. Ich habe 10 Minuten später angefangen, aber irgendwie ist die Zeit schon abgelaufen. Ich wollte ja noch Zeit für Fragen haben, aber es gibt einen Vorteil, das möchte ich hier kurz noch sagen, für alle Beteiligten. Und
because I know everybody's listening in my monotone voice. How many
Weiß,
airlines are in the
dass
room?
ich ein bisschen monoton
Airline
gesprochen habe, aber wie viele
representatives?
Fluggesellschaften sind hier
Okay.
vertreten im Saal?
Good to see you,
Ah ja,
Falcon.
okay.
Okay.
Gut,
How about
Sie
air
wiederzusehen.
navigation service
Wie
providers, air
viele
traffic
sind aus
control
der
related
Luftnavigation, also
people?
Fluglotsen zum
How
Beispiel?
about airport?
Flughafenbetreiber?
Okay.
Ah ja, auch viele
How about citizens
Flughafenbetreiber.
concerned about
Und
noise?
welche sind
by the way, you
Anrainer,
can vote twice,
Bevölkerung,
right? If you're
allgemeine
an airport
Bevölkerung?
union,
Naja,
you
Sie
can
können ja auch
also
beide Hände
Okay.
hochhalten,
The
wenn
bottom line
beides
is-
zutreffend ist.
Oh,
Nun, was
I
ich hier
forgot.
sagen möchte, oder einen Punkt habe ich vergessen. Gesetzgeber. Wer ist Gesetzgeber? Irgendwie aus der Regierung oder Kommune? Leider gibt es keine globale Organisation, die in der ganzen Welt tätig ist und auch zu Ihrem Flughafen oder in Ihre Region kommt und sagt, ich bin hier, um Ihnen GBAS zu installieren. GBAS funktioniert so, dass die Menschen den Schritt tun müssen, sich mit den Vorteilen befassen und die Beteiligten zusammenbringen, also die Beteiligten, die ich jetzt gerade erwähnt habe, also auch die Gemeinden, die Kommunen, die von Lärm belastet sind, und dann zu sagen, okay, schauen wir uns mal an, welche Möglichkeiten wir haben, GBAS zu installieren. Also Sie müssen von Anfang an zusammenarbeiten, dass es keine bösen Überraschungen gibt, und das ist ganz wichtig. Also
Doesn't do us any good to put in a Honeywell GBAS piece of equipment and nobody ever uses it or nobody ever gets cleared to use it once it's transmitting. So the call to action that I want to leave you with is to say this.
Was ich jetzt zum
Don't
Abschluss
wait.
sagen möchte,
Any one of you
warten
that
Sie
raised
nicht
your
zu lange
hand
ab.
and even
Also
those that
jeder
didn't
von
raise
Ihnen,
your
der
hand,
Ihr
you can
Handzeichen...
initiate this activity. And instead of action required, maybe leadership required is a better way to put it. And there's a wonderful case study, if you want to look at one, right here at Frankfurt as to how this project is unfolding. And I would just suggest to you that you need not wait. This is certified airborne equipment, this is certified ground equipment, and it is available now. Don't be afraid, we won't go through this, but just know that this exists. The point I want to make here is that GBAS is an investment, like many things, and don't be surprised if the person that ends up having to put the initial outlay of funds is not the immediate recipient of a bunch of money coming back, like a bank account or even a slot machine if you're lucky, or a craps table. But the value chain is there to make the business case. And if you are any one of these entities, you may say, I will enter this process here, do what my part of this is, draw the other stakeholders together, but ultimately this does make sense from a business perspective. It's just that the money has to flow through this value chain to get there. I'm going to skip this commercial message, but there are people like Honeywell that not only make avionics and GBAS systems, but we also can do training and procedure design. If you don't have that kind of capability at your location, we're very fortunate here in Germany because we have excellent organizations like Fraport and DLR and DFS and the BAF that can do much of this work. But at the point that they get overwhelmed or they need additional help, we have those resources as well. So GBAS is actually very easy and within reach. And with that, I maybe have a few minutes for questions. Or...
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Reines. Ja, dann Fragen.
Questions. In the back, there is one question. The first question.
Chart from Austro Control Vienna. We are an ANSP, just for your categorization. Thank you for the excellent presentation. I was wondering if we look at ILS as a standard for the years to come, and we mix it with GBAS, isn't that an issue both for capacity and also for the business case that you're showing? Because it sounds great if you say I can basically service multiple runways with one station, but if I still have to maintain ILS equipage on ground, it's an add-on investment. And the question about capacity is if Air Berlin 123 can fly a GBAS approach, but the traffic behind cannot, this may be a capacity issue. It sounds very good if we have a pure GBAS environment and the technology is very convincing, but the mix of traffic may be an issue.
And I apologize with the acoustics. It was a little hard to hear.
He asked for the problematic of a mixed approach for GBAS-based systems and flights and non-GBAS-based, ILS-based flights.
So mixed equipage, right? And this is going to be a classic case with any new technology, right, where you have a mixture of older and newer airplanes with different capabilities. There's a number of different ways that you can handle that. One kind of easy phrase is to say best capable, best served, okay? And that's controversial depending on where you go in the world, because some people say, look, everybody, is going to pay the same landing fee, they should get the same service. But with the flexibility of the GBAS approaches, particularly the R&P to GBAS approaches, you can deconflict those operations from the mainstream, long queues on the ILS, where you can find gaps, or where you actually can send airplanes that are GLS equipped to different runways. At Newark, as an example, there's a runway 29 that you can't even put an ILS on. And GLS equipped airplanes will eventually go there and get them out of the stream for the arrival on the 4s, right? Because every time they go to the other runway, there's a slot open for somebody who's not equipped. So you'll see ILS and GBAS exist together for quite a while. But what we hope will happen is the people flying the GLS approaches will be having some either competitive advantage or financial savings from shorter track miles, and that would be the encouragement for other people to accelerate their equipage.
Okay, thank you. Dann war hier eine Frage.
Question here at the front.
Of 4,000 airplanes equipped with GSL in 2017. What is your prognosis to have 50% of the airplanes flying? Is it 2025 or 2040 to have enough airplanes missing my station 44 in the on-flight to Frankfurt?
So we call that the inflection point. When do you have critical mass of equipped airplanes? And it depends on what kind of result you're looking for and what location. So if you go to a place, I'm trying to think of one that I can talk about without getting into trouble. If you go to JFK, okay, you will find that they will have an operational benefit even with just 4 to 5% of the airplanes that are coming in there equipped. Other places will say, because they're not going to do best capable, best served, I have to have 40, 50%. So 2016 to 2018 is that inflection time point that we look at. And as they say, your results may vary depending on, what your intent is. If your intent is to not put some ILSs in, right, that would be where you could say there's a direct savings. When can I not have an ILS on every runway? When would I feel comfortable doing that? Dubai World Central may say, look, I'm going to do the first, how many runways are you doing? 6 runways. I'm going to do the first 2 ILSs at all the ends, and the rest of them, I'm just going to use the GBAS as an example.
Thank you. One more question, and then we start to the next lecture.
I'm worried about this question because you're sitting next to Landina from Eurocontrol, who chairs the International GBAS Working Group. She didn't hand you a question, I hope.
It's not a question to Mr. Reines, but a question to the representatives of the airlines here. Are all the ordered new airplanes equipped with GBAS systems? I don't think so.
Okay.
Vielleicht.
So
Wer möchte?
I can answer that from our talks with our friends from British Airways. When you buy a 787, it's equipped and activated, and your A380s are equipped, and I'm not sure they've made the activation decision. So at least a portion of your new fleet is coming along with those.
You can ask directly.
I think that's the perfect answer. I can't say for absolute certainty whether we've activated. I know we've got, very early on, we established GBAS compatibility as being very important for the future operation of the aircraft, so for a multitude of operational reasons as well. So I'm very confident we've got the equipment, the level and the activation time for the on-aircraft capability is something that I'm sorry I can't answer at the moment.
I ask that everybody help
Zufrieden
as well with
bei
chicken and
Jürgen.
egg.
Ja, ich wollte gerade nachfragen, Herr Pauli.
747-8s from Lufthansa are equipped and
So I think the A380 and the Airbus is coming in. They are equipped, but not activated at the moment. But I heard, for example, yesterday that the 777 coming in next week probably, they have something else. Something. Do we have the Boeing representative or here? I cannot answer what it is, but it's something else.
Also es geht das Gerücht, dass auch in den 777
The room that in the 777 there is a system. Okay.
The RMP can be used also for departure routes, this is correct?
the RMP
Can be
For
used
departure
also to
routes.
service departure routes, I assume.
yeah, and so it might not be, there's other categories like RNAV that are part of the same performance-based navigation. So you might have RNAV departures, RNAV SIDs, standard instrument departures. But yes, you generally don't need on a departure that same precise vertical guidance. You might want the lateral guidance for noise abatement, but yes, it's capability that's built into those airplanes already.